Hello and welcome to Salute. I'm your host, Bob Peters, and with me is a World War II veteran, Mr. Wally Lambert. I want to welcome you to the show, sir.
Thank you.
I'm interested in hearing your story. Let's start with, where were you born?
I was born in Jersey City, New Jersey, February the 7th, 1925. Grew up in Jersey City, and during those years, you have to realize it was the Depression. Things were tough on everyone, so you didn't have a lot of the amenities and things that children and people have today. So I went to schools in Jersey City, and the next thing you know, by the time you knew it, it was Pearl Harbor, December 1941. And Pearl Harbor, the young fellas were all leaving to go to the service, and I felt that I wanted to be a part of that. So within a year after Pearl Harbor, in December 1942, I went to New York City and I enlisted in the United States Navy.
Did you quit high school? A lot of the guys quit high school.
I quit high school in the senior year, yes.
Yeah, to join the service.
I could mention after that I went to work for the Bell Telephone and had many courses in electronics and was promoted to management and had many management courses and training at that level. Yes.
Yeah, well, we're going to start from the beginning. You know, why the Navy?
Well, my father was in the Navy in World War I, and I had made up my mind that I had wanted to go into the service, and I thought that I have to get into this before the war is over. So analyzing the situation, I thought in the Navy I would probably have a clean bunk to sleep in and probably get 3 square meals a day. And that's pretty much the way it worked out.
And you didn't mind being in the middle of the ocean?
No, I never minded being in the middle of the ocean. And of course the convoys always traveled, leaving the States in 1943, April 1943, headed for North Africa. You were in convoys, and I often think about it and relate it to other people. The convoys were thousands of ships. You got up on deck and you looked around, horizon to horizon, and wherever you looked, there were ships.
Yeah, but where did you go to basic?
My basic training, my boot camp training was, I went to Bainbridge, Maryland. And that was the first week of December. No, it was the first week of January 1943. And it was winter, cold. It was a brand new base, and it was basically a lot of mud, and construction was not completed yet. So I was only in boot camp about 5 weeks. And one evening a chief came around and said, "We're looking for volunteers for sea duty. Is there any people in here who are interested?" So I was one of them. So myself and several others, and 3 of the guys that I went with, next day we wound up in Little Creek, Virginia, which is an amphibious base, again under construction, cold, tents, Quonset huts. And after being interviewed there at Little Creek, had stated that I had some experience with boat handling on the New Jersey shore, and the chief was very impressed with that. Of course, I exaggerate a little bit as to my experiences with boat handling, but at that point he said, "You're in the amphibious forces now, and you're a boat coxswain." And he said, "You'll get it'll be a crew of 4." So I said, "Well, I have these 3 fellas I left boot camp with, and we'd like to stay together." So he said, "Those 3 guys are your boat crew."
Really?
Yeah.
They allowed that, huh?
Yeah, just like that. Well, all they needed was 2 seamen. Myself, the coxswain, and 2 seamen, and I guess the 4th person, I don't know if he came from the boot camp with us. His name was Stewart. He was from Orlando, Florida, and he was the engine man. He probably told them he knew something a little bit about diesel engines. So they said, "Well, you're the engine man." So that constituted the small boat crew. At that point, we received no training at all at Little Creek. We were put on an LST and shipped up to Pier 92 in New York City on the Hudson River. Now, Pier 92, what that would be, that was known as a receiving ship. Personnel went there to be assigned to new construction or wherever where the Navy saw fit to send you.
Mm-hmm.
After spending about 10 days at Pier 92 in New York City, which is a nice break for me because my wife, friends lived in, my wife, she wasn't my wife yet, lived in Jersey City, so you had liberties. You could hop on a train and be across the river in Jersey City and within a half hour or so. So getting back to the story, after being about 10 days at Pier 92, one Sunday they mustered us all together, put us on trucks, and took us to Bayonne, New Jersey. And at Bayonne, New Jersey, that date was a Sunday, April the 4th, 1943. We were put on an LST as small boat crews. And we found out the next morning we sailed and our destination was North Africa. So we proceeded to Bermuda, and at Bermuda picked up a huge convoy, and then that convoy headed out across the ocean and our destination, North Africa. As we became within a couple of 100 miles of North Africa, most of the LSTs went in through the Straits of Gibraltar to Oran and Algiers. If you remember, at this time, the fighting was still going on in Germany. Mm-hmm. They were over in North Africa. The Germans were pushed back now into Tunisia, and they had their backs up against the Mediterranean. However, a couple of the LSTs, one of them that I was on, we detoured and we were sent into a small port in French Morocco. The name of the port was Port Leoti. So we went up a river there at Port Leoti and docked. It was just a little village, but it presented a great opportunity to me because up until this point I had not had my hands on one of these Higgins boats as yet. But all the way over,
the Higgins boat, that's like a landing craft, right?
A Higgins boat is a landing craft.
Tell us a little about it.
The Higgins boat is, the Navy called them an LCVP, which stands for Landing Craft Vehicle Personnel. They were 36 feet long, and they were powered by a Gray Marine, a six-cylinder diesel engine. 36 foot. They had a crew of 4, a coxswain, 2 seamen, and a motor mechanic, and they could carry 36 troops. You could take 36 troops and their equipment into the beach, and you could take a small vehicle like a Jeep or a command car. Mm-hmm. So after arriving in Port Leoti, North Africa, the boat was put in the water. I got it started. I had read the book about it all the way over, fooled around with its controls on the way over, put it in the water and took off, went out into the ocean, and had a lot of fun making practice beachings in the surf. So that was something unusual. There was a heavy surf off of North Africa, so I got an opportunity to really get the feel of it and beach it and bring it out back through a heavy surf. And then we proceeded through North Africa, wound up in Bizerte, and by that time it was the end of June, early July 1943, and we knew there was a big operation coming up, and that would have been, they were getting prepared for the invasion of Sicily, which took place July the 10th, 1943. And at that time, I was assigned permanently to an LST. I was assigned in Tunis. I was assigned to the LST 381 and was assigned to my boat there. And within a few days, as I said, June 10th, June the 9th, we left Tunis and we were off the coast at Sicily. The early morning of July the 10th, 1943, we were loaded and by daybreak headed for the beach. They took in infantrymen from Patton's Third Army, And the beach I hit, the town was called Jella, and I was assigned to find Red Beach 1. Prior to the invasion, the day before, on the way over, they showed us photographs of the beach and what we would be looking for our landmarks.
Yeah, what to expect.
And they said, as you're coming in, you'll see a smokestack over to the left, and toward the middle of the town, you'll see the dome of a monastery. And as you get in closer, you'll see a small jetty with a small lighthouse or a structure on the end of it. Anything to the right of that jetty is Red Beach 1. So navigating to that I had no trouble at all. However, on the way in, we came under fire of a German 88, which is a high-powered German field gun. They're very accurate, and all was going well. It was a nice sunny morning, and I was feeling pretty good. So far, so good. And with that, there was a big explosion in front of us. And I rode through smoke and burnt powder, which was from an exploding shell. A few seconds later, there was another explosion, and that was behind us.
Whoa.
So the lieutenant in charge of the troops in the landing craft said, a sailor, he said, he's got you bracketed, which meant
He's got you in his
the
sights.
next one is going to be here. So I gave it a hard right rudder, made a 90-degree turn, and got out of that little formation. We were running in a formation of about 10 or 12 boats. So I took off to the right, and sure enough, a shell landed about where the spot I had left. And we proceeded to the beach. Everything was going well. But at that time, there was a cruiser and a destroyer off our port side, and they were shelling the beach. And I think they probably had an idea where this they called it a mobile, where this mobile 88 was located, and I think the shell fire from the cruiser and the destroyer drove them away. But at that time, I got down behind the console, had the boat headed for the beach, was running at full throttle, didn't know we were on the beach until we hit it. Well, that was good. Killed the engine, ordered the ramp to be dropped. The troops went out, and I doubt if we were really up on the beach. I doubt if they got their feet wet.
Really?
So it worked out. Hiding behind the console and letting the boat find the beach by itself was a good move. And they were made to do that. They were made to do that. And of course, when it was unloaded and all that weight was out of it, we were buoyant enough to back out. Mm-hmm. Then I headed back to a transport. It was the USS Dickman, which is they call those, and they're a big ship. They just carry troops. They call them attack transport. The Dickman was the APA 13. So I went back to the Dickman to pick up another load and to transport it back to the beach again. But this time they gave me cargo. So the second run back to the beach, I took cargo. Had no problems with that. And there was no enemy fire coming in that second time around. But of course, hours had elapsed now. By then it was late afternoon, and I headed back to my own ship, the LST 381.
Tell me a little bit about the LST. See, a lot of people don't know the size of these boats.
Well, an LST is a huge landing ship. The designation stands for Landing Ship Tank. They are 327 feet long, 55-foot beam, and in the bow, they're a flat bottom. They are designed that way, flat-bottomed, so they could go in on a beach, run up on a beach. When they would open the big bow doors, and then inside the bow doors was a watertight, a water-sealed ramp. So the bow doors were not watertight. There was actually a space in there, and when you would get underway, or when the ramp was retracted and the bow doors closed, a seaman would go down there on a ladder, and they were huge dogs. And dogs are clamps that you would clamp it and crank the bow doors tight so they couldn't open up. So when an LST hit the beach, the two bow doors would open, the ramps would come down, and hopefully the tanks would run off and the infantrymen would run off maybe knee-deep water or as high and dry as you could possibly get them. And the LST had a crew of about 100 men and 8 officers, had a galley, and pretty substantial crew quarters, a nice bunk to sleep in, stacked 3 high. But that berthing compartment, it was crew quarters, that was your berthing compartment and your mess hall at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And down the sides of the LST were troop berthing compartments where we could probably carry a couple of hundred troops and bunk them and have toilet and bath facilities for them. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you were telling me too when they landed, you had to wait for the tide or something.
Well, at Normandy, at Normandy, the deal was within a day or two after the invasion, which was June 6, 1944, the LSTs, we would go in at high tide. And as the tide receded and went out, the ship would be sitting there high and dry. So then when the doors opened and the ramp went down, tanks, trucks, personnel could walk off on dry land. Of course, you had to wait 12 hours for the next high tide.
You were kind of a sitting duck then, weren't you?
We were a sitting duck, but I would have to say the difference between, to me, the war in the Mediterranean, North Africa, Sicily, and Italy, the Germans still had air power. They had air bases in Sicily and Italy, so you were very close to their airfields, and they still had airplanes. D-Day morning, Normandy, never saw a German, I didn't see a German plane in the sky. And the Allied Air Force was there in strength. I can remember by daybreak, I thought like the sky is swarming with US and British fighter planes just looking to engage somebody. But I never saw a German aircraft over the beaches at Normandy.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Didn't they fool the Germans by setting up phony tanks and stuff, and the Germans actually thought they were going to invade someplace else, so a lot of the aircraft went that way. And that's when you guys hit.
Well, I would say that was before in England with decoys to fool the Germans. They invented a fake army that Patton would be in charge of.
Right.
So over near Dover, which would be the shortest run across the channel, from Dover to the Pas de Calais, where the Canadians had tried a landing 2 years before and were basically wiped out. Hitler thought the main landings in France would be at the Pas de Calais, because it was only about 22 miles across the channel.
Yeah.
So on the Dover side, they did set up, they had rubber tanks, rubber trucks, aircraft, all kind of military equipment, and I guess they did dupe the Germans into thinking this is going to be the jumping off point, but actually it wasn't. And the main landings were all along the French coast at Normandy, between the Brits. The Brits had 3 beaches there. I think it was, when we landed at Normandy, we took the Brits in to Gold Beach. So they had it was Gold, Sword, and one other beach. And the Americans had Omaha Beach coming to the west. The Americans had Omaha Beach and Utah Beach. Omaha Beach is where the cliffs were.
Yes.
The Rangers Point to Hawk. The Rangers would train to scale. And they thought at that point, at Point to Hawk, the Germans had huge artillery guns, which turned out to be not there when they finally scaled the cliffs. But the losses at Omaha Beach, They were one of some of the heavy losses during the war. I think there were about 2,200 casualties that morning at Omaha Beach.
Mm-hmm.
And most of those casualties, the boats couldn't get in because of landing craft obstacles, rough seas. The seas were very rough that morning, which was hazardous for the landing craft. They couldn't get heavy equipment ashore. Much of their equipment and radios were lost. The Rangers finally did scale the heights and took command of the machine gun nests, and things were at the top. But in my opinion, and not only in my opinion, I think it's a fact, all the casualties that were, most of them resulted from machine gun fire, not from heavy artillery.
Yeah.
On Omaha Beach, it was machine gun fire. The Germans had wonderful machine guns, and they were masters at using them. So they just mowed guys down as they come out of the landing craft. Yes.
After D-Day, you served for quite a while after that. Where did you go? What did you do?
Well, okay, a lot of people don't realize. You would say the D-Day, the ships were there, the troops, the boats, everybody is unloaded, their job is done. That's not so. Because we were told before the invasion, the logistics, in other words, for 90 days or 3 months after the invasion, we have to keep the supplies coming over the beaches. You have to realize, too, there were no ports. Cherbourg, Le Havre, those places were occupied by Germans. So the only way to bring supplies in were mostly over the beaches. So after D-Day, back to England. Were there a day or two, refurbished food, ammunition, and within 2 days after D-Day, we were back in Normandy again. And this is when we would go in at high tide, wait for the next, let everybody off, retract from the beach at the next high tide, and again, back to England. Every 2 to 3 days, we made a trip. It could be Southampton, Weymouth, Falmouth, London. So every couple of days, we were back with more supplies. And there were many types of landing craft, particularly the LSTs, because we probably had a couple of, maybe 200 of them operating at Normandy.
Wow, that's a lot.
So carrying a lot of troops, tanks, equipment in. It was summed up after the Normandy invasion, the LST that I was on, the LST-25. In that 90-day period, I have the documentation for it with me here, taken from the ship logs and the National Archives. In the 22 trips that the LST made in the next 90 days, they transported something like 1,044 vehicles and 14,000 men.
Oh, you guys were busy.
I say 14,000, maybe. I have the numbers on my, but they took over 1,000 vehicles and probably 14,000 men, yeah, in 90-day period, yes. So then our job was done at Normandy.
Before I run out of time, I found an article in a newspaper about you. You were just recently given an award. Would you like to tell us a little bit about this award you just received? I'm sure you have other medals too from the African campaign and what have you, but this is a special one. Tell me a little bit about it.
Well, yes, recently it took place this past April in Miami, Florida, at the Florida International University. And getting back, the story is, somebody had told me, said, did you apply for the French decoration, the Legion of Honor? So I said, no, that I hadn't. So they said, well, if you were at Normandy, you should investigate that. So I said, all right, how do I investigate it and get information on this? So they said, all right, first thing you have to do, go on the internet and go to Google the French Embassy at Miami, which I did. And on there, at that website, was a link, Medals for American Veterans. So I went to that link and so found out that there was an application. You could apply for an application online to the French Embassy in Miami, which I did. Now, this was probably well more than a year ago. So the application came through and instructed you what to qualify for it. So the qualifications would be, you had to, during a certain time period, you had, in World War II, you had to serve on French soil. Not Belgium, not the Battle of the Bulge, not in Germany. You had to fight on French soil during a certain time period, which Normandy was one of them. So it was a lengthy application about your military history, ships you were on, what happened, where you were, and then mailed that to the French General Council in Miami, which I did. So months went by and I hadn't heard, but then also inquired about it once, and they said, well, you will not hear about this. It could take up to a year, and you won't hear about it until the application from here, from Miami, goes to the General Council in Washington, D.C., and then goes to the Honor Committee in Paris. And they're the people that make the decision. So lo and behold, sometime toward the end of March of this year, I received a letter saying that I was accepted, and the I would be indoctrinated into the French Legion of Honor, which is one of France's highest military distinctions, and that would take place at the Florida International University in Miami, Florida, on April the 2nd, 2014. So we made that, we were there, most of my family was there, and the medal was presented by the French General Council, and it was a very, very honorable thing for me, and my family was enthused about it. And there were 4 generations of my family there.
Wow.
My oldest granddaughter, who lives in Coral Gables, has 4 children. Her oldest child, a boy, who is 18 years old, so that's my oldest great-grandson was there, 18 years old. So now he's off, he's gone, he's off to the, right now he's a freshman at the University of Virginia.
I want to congratulate you on that. Unfortunately, I'm running out of time. I understand that you've talked to some of the students and you're going to go back next year and talk to some more kids.
To a history class.
To a history class. And I'd love to spend more time talking with you, but unfortunately, we're out of time. But once again, I want to congratulate you for that medal and everything else you've done for this country.
It was my pleasure, my honor to be here.
And we have to say goodbye, so maybe you would like to join me as I say goodbye. So, to all our veterans out there, our active military and their families, we salute you for all you do. Till next time.
Salute to all the veterans.
That's right, and their families.